Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Johnny Davis Live. That's right, guys. We're here today on this August 30th, 2019, Labor Day weekend. I know a lot of people have a 4-day weekend. I'm looking forward to mine. I tell you, I've been wide open, going 100 miles an hour, working on a lot of different projects and things like that and all. But I'm really excited about our guest today, that we will be speaking to, the one and the only Dr. John Lucas, who is one of the most prolific fight doctors, and I believe in the business. He has been working these events for a long time. He's very knowledgeable. I will tell you right now, if you are a fighter, if you are a trainer or the parent of a fighter, you need to check into this broadcast today, because we're going to talk about some really good information that can help keep your fighters safe. So just in case you're doing some crazy things. By the way, hey, my Johnny Davis Live cap there, guys. There it is, right? I have my t-shirts too. I don't have that on today. I actually have my Blackout Fight Gear shirt on today. We're always thankful for their sponsorship. You can see more about Blackout Fights at blackoutfights.com, guys, for some great equipment, really safe stuff. If you want to protect those tools, as I always say, check them out at blackoutfights.com. Also, we'll be speaking a little later to Mr. Jake DeAndra. He's out of Sacramento, California. He's an IKF PKB promoter. We will talk to him about an event that he has coming up. But the most of our show today is going to be dedicated to Dr. John Lucas. Again, someone who is going to do a lot for our sport, has done and will continue to do a lot for our sport. The other thing is that obviously we are in the midst of our registration for the seventh annual IKF East Coast Classic. Is going to be happening October 4th and 5th in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, at the Crown Reef Conference Center. In fact, Dr. Lucas is our chief fight doctor for that event as well. Registration is going on right now. Remember, registration goes up again on Monday, so get your registrations in before Monday and save about $10 to $15 for that event. It's a great event, good registration going on so far. We have about 50-some divisions that are already open. Remember, this is the final weekend for you to open your division, your desired division. After that, there's going to be a select amount of divisions there, and you can only register in those divisions after Monday, right? So a couple things going on. After Monday, you're only going to be able to register in divisions that are there, and the price is going up. Why pay more, right? The IKF East Coast Classic, it is a great event. It's a fun event, and I'm not just saying it's great because I'm involved with it, but it really is a pretty good event. I think most people who've been involved with it can pretty much tell you the same thing. I hope that you guys will plan to come out to that tournament and see what it's all about. We are certainly trying to make it something special for you. Speaking of that, finally, we are still trying to find a 153-pound contender for Mr. John Gray. John Gray is our IKF United States Amateur Champion, and he's looking for a match to defend his title, or up to 4 people can get into a 4-person tournament if that is the case. Mr. John Gray is the man. He's the man to beat and all. And so if you know people that might qualify for that particular title, then you should let them know, hey, we are looking for them. You have to qualify for it, though. It's not something that you just jump in. Right, you have to qualify for it. You got to have a proven record and all that stuff. But Mr. John Gray, he's undefeated. He's the man. He is waiting on you. But you need to do it by September 6th, because after that, we're just going to move on to some other things, and he might just fight in the East Coast Classic tournament. But we want to defend that title, because ultimately, if he wins, right, we're going to be offering him a world title really soon, probably in the March event. Right, so step it up. Come on, guys. Come on down, as they say in The Price is Right. All right, guys, without any further ado, we're going to move right on to our special guest interview. And as I said, to anybody out there right now, if you're in the fight business, you want to tune into this, because I think this interview is going to help a lot of people when it comes to health and fitness. I want to right now just take a moment to bring on someone who I've been working with for at least probably 7 years now. He is the man with the plan. Please welcome Dr. John Lucas, the fight doctor. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you, Johnny?
I'm doing fine. I'm really happy to have you on today. I was looking forward to this interview because we did one last year, Had a couple of audio issues, but I still have had it up on the site, and we've gotten over 600 and some views on that. And I mean, I'm assuming that we've helped a lot of people, in that time. That is the goal, is to try to help people. And one of the reasons why I want to have you on, because you're so knowledgeable about, obviously the medical field, but in particular in the fight business. And I just think there's so many things that you can help out these fighters with. So I'm excited to have you on today. And I remember on the last show that when we talked about so many different things. We talked about hydration and about concussion protocol and all of those things. And I'll be very honest with you. After I finished that interview, I brought up a subject, Dr. Lucas, about how I almost killed myself out there, And you told me how stupid I was. Now listen, I still work out hard, and I was out doing that again. I was doing it again, Doc. And I heard you loud and clear in my brain say, "Why are you being stupid? Take that toboggan off." Take that sweater hat off, take off that hood and that plastic that you got on, and before you fall out, fool. So I guess I owe you some thank you. Thank you for saving my life, because I was starting to feel my heart beating again really hard and stuff like that. So thanks so much. I know that's crazy on my part, but to give you a more proper introduction, Dr. Lucas. Dr. Lucas specializes in pediatric cardiology and pediatrics. That means children and heart conditions and things like that. But again, he's very, very knowledgeable about the fight game, because he's been involved with the fight game for a very long time: MMA, kickboxing, boxing, you name it, and taking care of fighters. And so how have things been going, Dr. Lucas?
They've been going good. Been busy and getting geared up for the East Coast Classic coming up. Looking forward to that as always.
Yeah, I really appreciate your part in that. You really help us out so much in taking care of the fighters and all. And I think that is something that a lot of people maybe don't have at some of these events. I don't know. I'm just fortunate to have you and Dr. Newkirk there, as well as the medic ambulance. Not medic, is it?
Adams Link.
Adams Link, thank you very much. Ambulance services for being there as well, to make sure that we properly, take care of those fighters. You're training with Mr. Ray Thompson right now. How is that guy doing? We had him on the show not too long ago.
Yeah, he's kind of, he's always busy, but he's even busy for him now, because he's got that new academy that's literally days away from opening. We could be in there as soon as a week or so from now. So he's had his fingers and everything they do to make sure it's being done right, and that it's the way he wants it, and getting all the pads and equipment and mats and stuff moved in. So both exciting and I'm sure very, very stressful for him.
Yeah, that is an amazing process that I'm seeing him go through with that gym. That is just going to be a mega, mega gym. And maybe I'll get him on the show and I'll do a special show about that gym, because I think it's something that we need. We need really nice gyms like that. And you can let him know, too, that I know who hit that $1.5 billion lottery now. So we kind of know. Hey, tell him I'm really disappointed that he didn't tell me about that, but that's okay. It's all good. It's all good. But I know you're going to keep it a secret, so that's okay. Anonymous, yeah. Anonymous. I know Ray's going to kill me for that one. But Dr. Lucas, you train as in jiu-jitsu. And you've been doing that for years. I noticed you're moving up in that. And I wanted to say that as an additional qualification for the fact that you are in the fight business. I mean, literally, you train as a martial artist and have been training for a long time with that and kickboxing. Here recently, though, I noticed that you worked a UFC event.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your experience from working that.
So it was, it was really fun. It was the biggest event. When I say biggest as far as there was the most money involved and the most administration people, the UFC puts on events basically every weekend now. So they have a huge team to cover everything, where, most of the smaller events I go to, it's just me, the promoter, and that, and the fighters. There's not fighter managers. There's not a medical team from the promotion that's, got information about the fighters. And if you want to get something figured out, you got to ask the fighter yourself. Where with the UFC, if I want to know, did this person get their physical, they can pick up their little tablet and in 2 seconds, yep, they got it. It was done here by this person. This is what it showed. Here's their MRI, all that kind of stuff. So the amount of information was a lot bigger. And then the pressures of being on TV and having a specific time schedule, they have time set out for this particular event on ESPN Plus. It was supposed to start at X o'clock and end at, X plus 3 o'clock. And it had to stay on that schedule. So you had to get stuff done on time correctly the first time. And then the skill level of the fighters, as you know, from kickboxing, there's a difference between how much damage two kids that have never fought before can do versus two teens that have 8 fights each versus, like John Gray, somebody like that that's been fighting amateur and is, legitimately ready for a national title versus somebody who has 150 pro fights and, or a UFC fighter that's got 25, 30 pro fights and has been fighting their whole life. Things can change, and a very small mistake can make a huge difference in the health of a fighter very, very quickly. So the amount of physical damage that we saw during those fights was different than most of the other fights I dealt with. I mean, I know you're not a huge UFC fan.
Well, you didn't watch the fight. I'm not a huge UFC fan. I'm not the biggest fan of MMA in particular. Right. UFC, I got to give them, hey, I'm just jealous of them. Like I said.
So we had a couple of guys and one woman that got pretty significant cuts. One gentleman in particular had a really big cut. And, trying to balance, he, of course, wants to continue fighting because he's got $50,000 of paycheck, depending on whether he can finish and potentially win the fight or whether he's stopped by me, but also not wanting to let him get permanently injured if he's got an injury that is going to potentially lead to that if it's not addressed at the time. So I had to make a lot more medical decisions in a short period of time during that show than I've had to make before.
Right. So that's one of the big differences that you saw was that the level of maybe injuries are a little bit more intense than what you would normally see. And also what did that do to your mindset about, was it at a higher level, a higher alert level?
Yeah, mostly not so much a higher alert level, but just trying to work at a little bit of a faster frame rate, for lack of a better term. Because, when you're watching a boxing fight and you got two guys going at it with 10-ounce gloves on and somebody gets a little cut, that's probably not going to turn into a huge gash with a single additional punch. It's probably going to take a flurry. It's something they'll usually develop over some time, where with those little 4-ounce gloves, and especially with the ability to throw elbows and knees, the guy that got the biggest laceration, he was literally fine 1 second, and the next second he was bleeding like a stuck pig. And I'm trying to figure out from the sideline, is that all blood? How big is the actual laceration? Should I be trying to signal Dan and get him to stop this now? So was trying to make assessments a little bit more quickly than I'd have to in a lot of other situations. And you're physically a little bit further away from the fighters there, because the UFC, the actual octagon they're in, physically has more square footage than like a boxing ring or the amateur MMA events I'm at. Their cages are significantly smaller, so you can see better and you're physically closer to the person wherever they are in the cage. So it was just different.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. I mean, because I thought that you might get a different perspective, if you will, in working an event like the UFC, an international event that size, than you would working like, the local promotions that you're doing and stuff like that. Did it educate you in a way that make you maybe see things a little bit differently at these smaller events from a doctor perspective?
I don't, this is going to sound really arrogant, and I don't mean it that way, but it didn't really change my perspective a whole lot, but it gave me a really good opportunity to confirm my general biases about when to stop fights, when not, who to let continue, who not to let continue, by being able to talk to a number of people that have been involved in fight sports and the medical side even longer than I have. So like the medical director of the UFC, a couple of other fight doctors, some of the UFC executives, about, hey, how do you think I handled this? Do you think we did this correctly? Did we do that correctly? How did the team, handle this? How did they handle that? And getting a lot of positive feedback was real helpful. So the only thing that I think really changed was my, most of the time that I'm at smaller events, smaller kickboxing events, smaller MMA events, I'm often the only physician there. Whereas at the UFC, there was myself, I had 4 other physicians, and then a nurse who also trains, who I've had a lot of experience working with before. So the only role I had during the event was to go into the octagon and be the person who was responsible for making decisions about, yes, you can continue, no, you can't continue, and deciding how long people's suspensions were after the event.
Uh-huh.
So I wasn't trying to, like, if I'm at an a local MMA event, and I'm the only guy there, and someone gets cut during the first fight, tell them, okay, hey, you got this laceration. It's not an emergency. I want you to do X, Y, and Z, and then go chill out in the locker room. And as soon as the fights are over, I'll come back, walk through the locker room, find you, and suture that. And that works about 60% of the time. It's not infrequent at all to go even during intermission, which is only 20, 30 minutes after the laceration was sustained, and the team stuff is all gone, the person's gone, and they're kind of off into the wind, never to be seen again. And
Right.
I don't know, did they go to the ER? Did someone, staple it with a roofing nailer? Did they
right.
Dermabond with them? I don't know what happened with that. And with other injuries, particularly potential concussive injuries, that's an even bigger issue. You have somebody that right when you're at the fight. So this happened to one of the fighters at the UFC event. Right after the event, her pupils were discordant, but most likely that's just a consequence of the fact that she had been hit, but probably not a sign of there being a significant neurotrauma, like probably not a bleed or things like that. But you don't really know that for certain.
Right.
At a local event, I would have been stuck with, okay, well, go back. I'm going to have your team and your mom or your girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever keep an eye on you and come get me if they start throwing up, if their headache gets worse, if they complain about double vision, blah, blah, blah. Where at the UFC and say, hey, I don't like the way this looks. One of the other doctors that I work with is a friend of mine who's a neurosurgeon, so I can get an immediate opinion on someone who's really an expert on neurotrauma. And then we plopped her into an ambulance and sent her directly to the trauma center, and she got a CT of her brain. So by the time the event was over, I was able to go with the UFC folks to the hospital and knew that, she had multiple neuro checks done by an ER physician. She had a CT scan and was clear. She was perfectly good to go. In her case, it wouldn't, in retrospect, it wouldn't have made any difference. But if she had been the person that really did have something serious going on, she did have a Barry aneurysm that was bleeding, or she got a little skull fracture that we couldn't see on physical exam, was bleeding into her brain and was starting to get cerebral hemorrhage and hypertension and stuff like that. That would be the difference between figuring that out when she loses consciousness in the back of the gym in the middle of nowhere versus having that found out in the ER by scanning when there's people that can do something about it right there.
Wow. Yeah, that is a lot, very much a different kind of experience there in working with them. I want to dive in a little bit back into the exam again that we do at a lot of these fights. And, you talked about, you noticed some things on that particular fighter. I guess what I kind of want to ask is, have you ever at the beginning of a fight, watched a fighter, that you're examining, they look really bad? Maybe you see something about that fighter that might make you think that they're not fight ready. Have you ever pulled a fighter?
Fortunately, it's been really rare. I can only think of 2 examples of that. And one of them was it was actually back, and it was at an event where we did the physicals the day before, and the person had clearly had a medical condition they had not disclosed to the appropriate promotion and, regulatory body. It was evident in their physical exam that would make them fighting much riskier than the average person. And in discussing that with them in the regulatory body, it was decided that person would not continue. And then the other was somebody who looked fine during their pre-fight physical, but something happened between the time that they had their pre-fight physical. And I can't remember if it was the day of the event or more likely it was the day before. Something happened, and the next day they just seemed off. They were kind of like vaguely confused. So either they had done something not really smart with their dehydration, rehydration, or they had trained heavier than they should have and took a shot, or got a takedown where they hit their head on something. They were clearly acting like they had been concussed, and didn't let them continue as well. And fortunately, in both situations, particularly the person who looked like they had probably taken some sort of head trauma, it was an amateur fighter, and I was expecting a lot of blowback from their trainer and their coaches and stuff like that. And there was absolutely none whatsoever. In fact, their coach seemed like they were pretty relieved that I made that determination because they knew something was off, but couldn't quite, for lack of a better term, put their finger on what it was. And they didn't want
Right.
to, you don't want to tell your fighter, hey, I don't think you should be fighting, but you want to fight. Okay, well, go on out there.
Right. Well, one of the things that, and I just keep hearing you talking about the eyes and looking at them. And I'm curious about, I don't completely understand dilation. And I know that having dilated pupils or whatever, it means something. Could you kind of give me an idea when you see someone's pupils dilated or whatever the case might be? Could you kind of give me some educate the audience on what that is and what that means?
When I say dilated, what I really mean, it's not usually both pupils being dilated. It's usually one of them being inappropriately dilated. So, you see all the time at fights, the doctor or the cutman or somebody taking that bright light and shining it in the fighter's eyes and
right
together. You have all these reactions that take place inside your brain and your eyes that should make both your pupils about the same size, and they should react predictably with light. If you're in a dark environment, you shine a bright light, you would expect the pupil to constrict. So if you're talking to somebody in the cage and you've got, all those really super bright lights around them, so it's, like daylight or brighter in the cage, and before they went into the cage, they looked normal, and now you look at them and either both or, more concerningly, one of their pupils is just completely blown wide open, and when you shine a light near it, it doesn't change. Something's very wrong to make that happen. That's not going to happen from any sort of a benign process. So that makes you wonder, could they have something going on where they've got extra pressure inside their brain? So they've got like some swelling or maybe some bleeding that's, pushing between their skull and their brain and putting pressure on their brain? Or do they have an actual parenchymal brain injury? There's got to be something wrong to explain that. Fortunately, I've never seen that, the so-called, what we call a blown pupil, which is in and of itself usually diagnostic of a very serious neurotrauma that's going to need someone to have their head literally depressurized. They'll go in and drill a hole through their skull so the pressure doesn't wind up adversely affecting the brain. But that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. But in general, I always sort of make kind of dumb small talk with the fighters when I'm seeing them during their pre-fight exam. And what I'm trying to get a general sense of is, what are they like? How do they talk? What's their speech sound like? Are they somebody who talks pressured? Are they someone who's more laid back and, kind of has the good old boy Southern drawl and seems like
right.
Because if someone who normally talks really fast and they're, like I am from upstate New York, and they're kind of talking at a fast pace and jumping from topic to topic to topic, and then you see them after a fight and they're talking like, the stereotypical good old boy from Alabama, and they're slow and they just don't seem themselves. That's significant, as opposed to if the person was always like that. We're in South Carolina, so there's lots of folks around here that have grown up and their natural speech pattern is sort of a slow. They kind of consider their words as they say them, and the pace at which they're a little bit slower. So knowing that kind of stuff is real helpful when you're trying to assess somebody afterwards, because the whole point of the post-fight physical is what has changed. Is this person different in some way that would indicate that they're injured? Are they suddenly not moving their right arm? Their shoulders used to be level and now their right shoulder is kind of up and back, so it's dislocated, but they don't want to tell me that because they're afraid that I'm going to tell them they can't fight in their second round because they just won their first round fight, and they're already thinking about that belt they want and don't want me to know that their shoulder's dislocated. That kind of stuff. Being able to sort of assess those things without having to have somebody come right out and say, I hurt X, Y, Z, or this, that, and the other thing is bothering me. Because I have especially during tournament fights, when people are oftentimes thinking about their next fight when they've just won a fight, or when you're doing your pre-fight physical and are thinking about getting into the ring, fighters are sometimes not very forthcoming with things that are bothering them or things that they know are wrong that they're just kind of hoping will go away if they ignore it.
Right. Well, one of the other things too, and like I said, I'm kind of going down a list here of some of the things that I noticed on the forums, and I just had a question about it. I just like, I'm going to dig deep. This is going to help people. It talks about in one area about a growing pain, like in your growing area. That have you ever had like any growing pains or bulging or history of a hernia? Right. So when it's asking a question like that, why is that significant in an exam?
So what they're looking for there is to see if you literally have a hernia. If there's a little outpouching where you have a tear in your muscle, or in boys, if your inguinal canal is bigger than it should be and it lets some of your bowels slip between the muscle layers of your abdomen. Because if that happens and you get involved in a sport where you're doing things, like when you throw a hook, you kind of clamp down, gird your chest and throw your hook, you kind of grunt. When you do that, you increase pressure inside your abdomen. And in doing that, if you've got a little place where your bowel can slip through, it's going to tend to slip through more because of the pressure that's there. Or, Muay Thai, you clinch with someone and you're trying to foot sweep them and dump them. Doing that, all that sort of stuff increases your intra-abdominal pressure and makes it more likely you could end up strangulating, or what they call incarcerating a hernia, where you would have a problem where the bowel gets stuck out there and can't get back into the abdomen. And then it takes something that's an inconvenience and turns it into a surgical emergency.
Oh, wow, man, that's you are so good at this. Hey, you are look. I consider myself, pretty decent at fighting, and I've pretty good boxing and kicks and stuff like that. And I really tried to be as good as I possibly could at fighting, at my techniques. You're like that, aren't you? You're a perfectionist. Do you consider yourself a perfectionist?
I try to be. And, if you're going to do something, especially something like this, you need to do it to your highest level of potential. Because I'm trying to contribute to fight sports, and I'm never going to do that as an athlete because, I'm 45. Unlike you, I can't do a full split. You're never going to see me winning a kickboxing or Muay Thai fight or anything like that. It's just not in the cards. And even in grappling, I'm just not a good enough athlete to make a mark as an athlete. But what I can hopefully do is try to help you and other folks who are promoting these events, let people who do have the potential to be excellent as a martial artist be able to compete as safely as possible and have as many of these events be able to continue, because there haven't been things, horrible things happen in the ring or in the cage because somebody that didn't really care was just kind of doing a half-hearted exam because they just wanted to get through and be done.
Right. So another thing is that they talk about surgeries, and they ask the question, have you ever had any surgeries? Mm-hmm. So is there an indication there that if you've had surgery somewhere, that now that area is weaker and perhaps more susceptible to injury again? Why are they asking that question?
So it kind of depends. I think that what that question really is asking is, have you ever had any real serious injuries? And if someone needed surgery for something, most surgeries would not be done for something that's super minor, although you'll find people, will disclose they had like a skin tag removed or had some cosmetic surgery to make this bigger, that smaller, or whatever. So that kind of stuff doesn't matter. But if someone's like, oh yeah, I had my spleen removed, or I only have one kidney, or in one case, I had a patient or a fighter who had pretty significant congenital heart surgery. So when they were an infant, they had their heart operated on. That kind of stuff can potentially, doesn't necessarily impact their suitability for fight sports, but it could potentially impact that. So they want to know, had something like that happened. And then it also gives you an idea of where to clue your exam in. So, the most common surgery we hear about, especially for folks who do Muay Thai and also do either MMA or grappling, is multiple orthopedic surgeries. I broke this, dislocated that, my knee operated on 4 times. So it lets you know that you need to take a look at the area that was operated on a little closer to make sure that it's working good enough that it's not going to be a hindrance for them. And I don't expect a fight sport athlete, especially an experienced one, to have a brand new body, because it doesn't work that way. You can't do this kind of stuff and not be injured in some permanent way eventually. But I want to make sure that bad knee that you've had a couple of surgeries on, isn't going to limit your mobility to the point that you're going to be a sitting duck when you're in the ring. Or if you've had a number of shoulder dislocations, I want to make sure that you can actually, under your own power, bring that hand up to protect yourself. Because if you can, then I'm good. But if I do that and it turns out you can't get your right side up over your clavicle because you've got an unrepaired spinatus tear, then you don't need to be fighting somebody who knows what they're doing, because they're going to identify that and they're going to knock you out.
Right, right. Hey, if you can't get that arm up over your crowd, that might be a problem with protecting that head. That
Yeah.
just might be a little bit of a problem. Me as your opponent, thank you very much. But
And that's something, you know, you hear when that's one of my favorite things about being at fight sport events is listening to the corners,
right,
especially experienced corners. And there's at your events, there's some guys there and some girls there that know what they're talking about. And you see them send their fighter out, and during the first round, it's very evenly matched. And then about halfway through the first round, the trainer in most cases, or sometimes the athlete for the really talented folks, they start noticing stuff. They notice, hey, when he switches stance, he's doing it because he's going to throw a hook kick with his left.
right,
Or whenever he throws a right hook, he drops his left hand. So there's a potential for follow up there. And they start exploiting that, and the total tide of the fight changes. But if you've got something injured so that you can't, there's no way you can correct whatever deficits you have, that's really exposing you to a lot of additional injury, especially against an experienced fighter. And you have to assume that the people you're fighting against are going to be competent. You can't
right.
assume they don't know what they're doing, or you're going to learn the hard way that eventually you're going to fight somebody that does, and it's not going to be a fun afternoon.
Right, right. Absolutely. You're absolutely right on that. I'm going to switch gears here just a second. A lot of things have been going on in the media about vitamin and supplements. A lot of fighters out there, you know, take supplements. Some of them seem to be maybe, I don't know, showing up in drug tests. What are your thoughts about supplements and what they do to the body, etc.?
So it depends. It's sort of a nebulous topic because, you know, supplements can be everything from somebody taking a Centrum one a day or a Flintstones vitamin to all these exotic things like pro hormones and stuff like that that are kind of quasi legal. Um,
Quasi legal. Okay.
yeah, I say quasi legal because they're sort of not yet illegal, but it's pretty clear that they're gonna be. They just haven't made it yet. They're kind of like where steroids were in the late 1980s, where they haven't been made federally illegal. You could still get them legally, but so like you can buy Ostarine, you can get that from a mail order. I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but it's something people that were looking for it would know. You can buy it from research chemical places, and it'll come in a little vial that says, you know, experimental only, not for human use. But that's just illegal.
Hey, if it's not for human use, that might be your sign right there.
But the contamination issue is a significant one, especially when you get kind of what I would say off the beaten path. So, you know, you walk into your local GNC or vitamin shop, and there's some big brands. You know, GNC has their own brand of vitamins and proteins and pre-workout supplements and creatine and stuff like that. And then there's, you know, Optimum Nutrition and whatnot. And then a little further in the corner, there's, you know, Joe Supplement, and they usually have outsized claims. They, you know, those are the ones that have the picture of that guy that's clearly on steroids flexing on the front of it. And it says that, you know, people that use this are going to turn into the next Mr. Olympia. And it's those supplements that are often pointed to as being a source of contaminant. Because if a big legitimate company like GNC, and I just use them because they're so big, but a company like that, one of the, you know, the big 3 or 4 supplement companies, if one of those companies has some of their protein powder or some of their creatine show up as having steroid traces in it, they're going to go out of business because their business is real professional athletes who are being tested using their stuff to try to get the potential benefit. And we'll get back to what that might be in a second from using protein powders and creatine and stuff like that. Where the little guys, they're just looking for market share. So Winstrol in particular is a common steroid that's available in pill form and is really cheap. And it shows up in a whole lot of weight gainers, muscle gainers, and stuff like that for small companies. And, you know, they say it's contamination, but if I were an unscrupulous dude who was looking to sell a lot of weight gainer, putting a little bit of steroid in your weight gainer is going to make it work really good. And the fact that it's going to melt the person's liver or, you know, whatever, that's not my problem. So the fact that that kind of stuff happens so frequently, it makes me suspect that some of the contamination is literally adulteration. And then the other, and you'll hear the testing folks from the UFC talk about this all the time, is when you have a company that does the compounding for, you know, like, so Johnny Davis Protein, they don't just make Johnny Davis Protein. They make Johnny Davis Protein between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock on the 3rd Wednesday in August, and the rest of the year they're making other stuff. And the other stuff that they're making, it could be horse tranquilizer, you know, it could be Viagra, it could be all sorts of stuff. And especially if that company is not in the United States, or even if it is, but they're not doing a good job of sterilization between batches. If they make horse tranquilizer until 2 o'clock and then shut the line down and then start making Johnny Davis protein, the couple batches of Johnny Davis protein, you're going to have detectable amounts of horse tranquilizer in it.
Right.
You know,
Wow.
some of the stuff that you see, and again, I get back to the UFC, just because they disclose publicly what their when one of their athletes tests positive through USADA, they always disclose what they tested positive for. And some of the stuff some of the athletes have tested positive for would be so idiotically stupid for someone who knows they're going to be tested to take. It makes it highly unlikely that they intentionally took it. You know, if you're going to try to cheat, you're going to try to cheat in such a way that you're not going to get caught. It'd be like what, you know, some of the longer acting steroids that people know metabolites are in your body for 6-8 weeks when you're getting tested for a fight that's coming up. That'd be like trying to cheat on your exam by literally carrying a laptop computer in and setting it up on the desk as you take the SAT. Someone's going to notice that you know, if you're going to cheat, you're going to most likely do it in a way that you don't think is going to be detected.
Wow. So do you think, for the most part, that some of these people might unknowingly be taking these supplements and it's showing up in drug tests? You know, like the John Jones, I think it was his issue and
Yeah.
stuff. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm just saying. What?
So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I've talked in other circumstances extensively about John Jones, and I don't know whether he actually took something or not. And it's also entirely possible, especially at the higher levels where
Right.
there's a lot of money involved and people have access to scientists that can help them devise a plan that will help avoid detection. You know, there's some state-sponsored, you know, with China and Russia being great examples of places that have Olympic teams that, in retrospect, entire segments of the team have been found to have been taking something that they knew was undetectable at the time. So there's definitely people who are trying to game the system. And if I knew that I was going to be dirty for something because I was taking it for a specific reason, it would be very attractive to try to find a supplement that had that in it and keep a can of it in the you know, in the closet. So back, you could say, "Oh, you know what? I'll bet that's that Johnny Davis protein. Maybe you all ought to test that." And then they test it, it comes up positive, and there it is. So, you know, I'm not trying to say that I think that necessarily the higher level athletes that are getting caught, I don't think that most or even a lot of them are accidentally coming across it. But I'll bet if you walk into your local high school or your local MMA gym and test people who are literally not intentionally using steroids or other banned substances, but are using a lot of supplements, you'd probably find quite a few of them who are taking things that are contaminated that would be detectable on tests that would have no idea.
Wow, that's amazing. Great information, Doc. You know, so while we're in that on that subject right there, one of the things I've had a major problem with for a long time, and I've talked about it with other guests on the show, but now I have a doctor on the show. Energy drinks. You know, there's like an epidemic of people taking energy drinks now. I want a medical opinion on what that does to the body, and do you think that all these kids, literally kids, taking drinking all these drinks today, it cannot be beneficial, or is it more detrimental?
Yeah, so that's an issue that's near and dear to my heart, no pun intended, because I see patients all the time, usually preteen and teenagers, that are complaining about palpitations, you know, feeling their heart racing or beating too fast at times. And after doing some testing, it turns out that they were drinking energy drinks or using pre-workout supplements, in a lot of cases excessively. So I don't think that most energy drinks, and again, we get into the whole thing again about there's big name energy drinks that are probably tested. They certainly have quality control. So I use Monster because it's probably the most popular energy drink. If you take your normal can of Monster and look at the side of the can, the label tells you that there's 180 milligrams of caffeine in that can. I'll bet that if you took that and got it tested in the lab, that it would be very close to 180 milligrams of caffeine in that can.
Wow.
But, you know, that's not that much different than a lot of coffee drinks you can get at Starbucks and stuff like that. The problem is you see people chugging 2, 3, 4 of those. And in particular, you see them doing that before they do a lot of cardiovascular exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And I think taking something that's going to make your heart rate significantly faster and then try to do some sort of cardiovascular exercise is counterproductive. small amounts of caffeine have been shown to increase your aerobic capacity. And that's why so many bicyclists use a little bit of caffeine.
Hmm.
But again, as you know, between Lance Armstrong and all the other guys in the Tour de France, there's a lot of other stuff they use too that probably has outsized effects compared to the caffeine. But anyways, small doses of caffeine can be beneficial, but big doses of caffeine are probably not. And I know that even personally, I'll be at work at 5 o'clock. I know I'm going to go train. I want to go lift weights at 6 and then do class from 7 till 9. So I'll swing by Starbucks and get a coffee or something like that. And if I show up at the gym and I feel my resting heart rate is higher, I can tell the difference when I start grappling that my cardio doesn't seem quite as good.
Well, what do you think about the fact that a lot of these fighters, they might be tired, they maybe work a job, and then they go to the gym, and right before, as you just said, they drink an energy drink to pep themselves up. Is that really giving them energy, or is it really kind of like diversely affecting them in another way? I mean, what's happening there?
Yeah, so assuming that the energy drink test has caffeine in it. So I mentioned Monster. There's some other energy drinks that have way more caffeine. Bang being the most recent example. That has 300 milligrams of caffeine, so almost twice as much. And then if you go by your local QT or Huawei or whatever, your little 7-Eleven store, there'll be big name energy drinks like that. And then there's next to that, there's another, again, Johnny Davis energy drink.
Ah!
And that is usually cooked up in somebody's kitchen or a small lab, and you have no idea how much caffeine is in that. And people have gotten into serious trouble with having seizures, having sorts of dysrhythmias. We've had people who have died from excessive caffeine consumption, largely because they're either caffeine naive, meaning they're not used to any caffeine at all and take a whole bunch of it, or they ingest way more caffeine than they thought they were going to. But specifically for guys that are fighting, or fighters, not just guys, women, whoever, that are going to be doing aerobic exercise like fighting, where you're going to probably be maxing out your heart rate anyways, I think it's very unwise to dose yourself consistently with caffeine before training for a couple of reasons. One, personally, I think that you're going to end up decreasing your overall aerobic capacity. You're going to decrease the amount of work you can do. And that's the whole point of training. You want your training to put in as much actual technical skill acquisition as possible. And then two, if your body is used to getting 2 or 3 or 400 milligrams of caffeine every time before it works out, when you get into a situation where you cannot do that, so like a sanctioned fight, the South Carolina Athletic Commission does not allow anything except for water in pre-sealed electrolyte containing sports drinks into the locker room, specifically banned are energy drinks. And I've actually had a fight that was canceled because the team brought a cooler full of Monsters in. So, they're serious about that. So if you get used to that, it's just like somebody who usually drinks a couple cups of coffee in the morning, and then they go on vacation, they don't drink their couple cups of coffee. They're completely useless because their body's used to that. So you want to train under the circumstances that you're going to fight at.
Right. So in some ways, they kind of maybe might go through a withdrawal or something like that, correct?
Yeah, or certainly you're mentally not going to feel the same because you're used to getting into the cage or into the ring to hit pads with your trainer, feeling kind of amped up. But now you're climbing into the cage and you're not feeling amped up. You're just feeling kind of anxious because the adrenaline you get from anxiety is a little different than the adrenaline you get from excitement or from caffeine. You feel different. So now your mental game is going to be a little bit off, which means your performance is probably not going to be quite as good.
Well, I mean, isn't that borderlining, if not full-fledged, some sort of addiction?
Yeah, addiction specialists don't consider caffeine addiction to be a real thing because it's so minor. And there are definitely people who were physically addicted to caffeine. Both my parents were teachers, and they used to go on vacation every summer with some teacher friends of theirs. And one of their teacher friends was famous for drinking like literally 7 or 8 or 9 cups of coffee during the day.
Wow.
Did every day her entire life. But they went on vacation, and she didn't drink coffee during the vacation. Never. So first day she was fine. Second day she kind of felt weird. Third day she was pretty much incapacitated with a headache. It happened years in a row. And then finally, a couple of the other teachers put it together that she was literally going through withdrawal from caffeine. Now, that's not going to happen if you drink an energy drink once in a while. But the problem with caffeine, because it is, it does have physiologic effects. The first time you drink a cup of coffee, you feel like Superman. A couple of years later, after drinking a cup of coffee regularly, you don't feel any different when you drink a cup of coffee. So you drink 2 and then 3. And the same thing happens with energy drinks. People feel like a new person when they drink a Monster, and then very quickly your body gets acclimated to that dose of caffeine, so you have to drink more, and that's what pushes you in dangerous directions. I have a couple of friends that power lift or do strongman competitions, and
Mhm.
if you look at any of the websites about those kind of strength athletes, because caffeine definitely gives you an advantage there. So almost everybody who does any sort of powerlifting will use a pre-workout supplement, which is basically just a powdered energy drink. But the pre-workout supplement will say on the can, use 1 scoop a half hour before exercise. Do not use more than the recommended amount, yada, yada, yada. Those guys are taking 3 scoops, 4 scoops because they use it so often, they get acclimated to it, and they're searching that same kind of jazzed up buzz. And then the next thing you know, you find guys that are taking in 1,600 or 2,000 milligrams of caffeine a day. And it's crazy. And
Wow.
it puts them at risk for developing, arrhythmias and stuff like that. And there have been, it's not frequent, but there have been people who have died from exposure to caffeine as their only stimulant through energy drinks. And
Wow.
some people have actually ordered anhydrous caffeine, again, from a chemical supply place, got a little Ziploc bag full of caffeine and put a scoop of it into something they were going to drink and drank it. Didn't realize how much caffeine was in that and died of what was a presumed dysrhythmia.
Right. So you're saying that maybe it's okay to consume a little bit of energy drink, but you have to really, really regulate it. Is that
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Or do you not?
Yeah.
I don't do them at all. I used to a long time ago. I don't do them at all now. I wiped them out of my whole play for like the last 10 years or so. But so what do you reckon? Do you say that it's okay for a little bit or not?
Yeah, basically, again, I wouldn't recommend using them prior to the typical type of training you should be doing
Okay.
for these sort of events. Now, before weightlifting, especially if you've got, like most amateur fighters do, you got other stuff you got to do during the day, and you've only got one period of time when you can, do your strength and conditioning. So if you're going to go do powerlifting, and this should not probably be in your camp, but between camps, you're trying to put on a little bit of muscle mass or something like that, and you're dragging. I don't have a problem people using a scoop of pre-workout before that. Again, this is adults. If you're less than 16, you probably shouldn't be using that at all.
Right.
So I have a 15-year-old son who's a defensive end on the football team. I won't let him touch that stuff.
Right.
But when he's an adult, it's up to him. And I could open up the cabinet off to my right here. I've got a thing of pre-workout that I sometimes use before I lift weights. But I lift weights at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and then go to work. And I don't do real cardio stuff and train jujitsu or whatever until that afternoon. I've a couple of times when I used to lift just before jujitsu, which was a bad idea for other reasons as a 45-year-old, but would sometimes use the pre-workout beforehand, and the kind of buzz you get from the caffeine is entirely detrimental to your performance in fight sport kind of things that are so cardio, especially anaerobically cardio dependent. They're helpful for static, completely or anaerobic exercise. So like running sprints, doing deadlifts, doing squats, doing benches and stuff like that. But for things that have any sort of dynamic or aerobic component, I don't think they're helpful, and they're probably detrimental.
Right. Well, boy, I mean, that's some great information on that. Okay, another hot topic that's going on. By the way, for you guys who are just checking in, you're watching Johnny Davis live here. We're here with Fight Doctor, Dr. John Lucas. He's out of the Simpsonville, Greenville, South Carolina area, guys, and really knows his thing about the fight game. So if you are a fighter or a trainer, you need to take a moment, whether it's now or watch this tape later. You need to definitely check this information out because it could very well save your fighter's life. Okay, next big thing going on right now is vaping. So you got these kids, you got some fighters that are vaping. They're thinking perhaps, hey, listen, you know what? I'm going to not smoke a cigarette because of the nicotine or whatever, CBD, whatever's in it. And instead, I'm going to, even I know they can put these things in vapes as well, but I'm going to vape instead. What is your opinion about vaping?
So there's increasing, and there's actually just been some very recent evidence that vaping is probably at least as dangerous as smoking.
Right.
As a general rule, anything except for oxygen shouldn't go into your lungs. So,
right.
Whatever else it is that you're thinking about putting in there, it doesn't belong there, and your body doesn't want it there. It's not going to benefit you, and it's likely to have some adverse effects. I know some people who are fastidious about trying to avoid all sorts of pollutants, and they're worried about the environment, this and bad air here and whatnot, but yet they're willing to vape. And, those vape cartridges, just a chemical factory. There's all sorts of stuff in there. And especially since the vaping industry is relatively new, I'd be a little skeptical of believing the label, especially from some of the smaller, again, Johnny's vape cartridges that guys make stuff in his garage, knowing exactly what's in those. But there's been now, and it doesn't sound like a lot because it's only one person, but if you're the one person it happens to, it's really important. They have one person has a confirmed death that was secondary to vaping. And there's increasing evidence in the pulmonology literature that vaping is definitely dangerous to your lungs. And again, if you're doing stuff that's aerobic, which kickboxing is for sure aerobic. I mean, that's a fantastic aerobic exercise. If you want to be good at that and have a good gas tank, then vaping is 100% counter to that. I would be just as skeptical of having a fighter that I was training vaping as I would be having them smoking cigarettes before they hop up into the ring.
Right. One of the other questions that on those exams they asked about, have you had experience with maybe urine being in the bloodstream or something like that? Or when they, what could that be signs of?
Urine being in the bloodstream?
Yes, urine being when you pee a little blood.
Oh, the other way around. Yeah.
There would be urine. Right. I mean, blood in your urine.
Blood in the urine, yeah. So blood in the urine, it can be benign. It doesn't necessarily mean there's a huge problem, but it would make you suspicious that you could have some kidney issues that are either developing or already present that would need some further investigation. So if you went, when we get off the call here, if you went to the bathroom and peed and there was blood in it, I would hope you would immediately go to your doctor and get that checked out. I know I sure would, because there's a chance that there's something bad going on there from a kidney standpoint. So that can be a marker for kidney disease. And some people can get blood in their urine from direct trauma. So you'll hear a lot of MMA fighters talking about the day after a fight peeing what looks like Coca-Cola because they took a bunch of shots to their kidneys, or rabbit punches, or in MMA where there's legal strikes to that area. They've taken a lot of kidney damage from that. People that dehydrate themselves and then fight, or people that have predilection towards developing rhabdomyolysis or something like that, will sometimes get what looks like blood in their urine, but it's really protein breakdown products. Or if they're really unlucky, they can get enough protein stuck in their kidneys that their kidneys get sick enough they start having blood. So it's just a question about, hey, has this ever happened? Because if it has, it's something that needs to be looked into.
Wow. That's great information there. I see some people there who are coming on making comments. I would love for you to make your comments right there in the comment line. If you're enjoying the show, just let us know. If this information is definitely helping you out, let us know that. We appreciate all the way from Ghana, Africa, there, one of our representatives over there saying this information is really valuable to them. And that's exactly what we want. Okay, headaches. If a person is having headaches, they're in training and they're having some headaches, what could that be signs of?
So it could be a sign of a bunch of things, and it kind of depends a little bit on the situation. So if you have a hard sparring day and have a headache after your hard sparring day, that would most likely be a sign that you've got concussion kind of symptoms. It's most likely a sign of some degree of neurotrauma. And it means you need to get that looked into to make sure that you don't need to take more than just a couple of days off. But for sure, it should be a warning sign that you need to take some time off until your headaches are gone and you're sort of back to your mental baseline before you even consider returning to any sort of head contact. Now, if you're getting headaches just when you're training, especially doing things like, hitting pads or something like that, where you're not really taking any shots to the head, there's a lot of things that can cause that. Sometimes dehydration can cause that. High blood pressure can certainly cause that, especially if it's consistent. So if that happens, especially if it happens more than once, or you start noticing a pattern where whenever you kind of do hard cardio, you get a headache, you need to get that looked into by a physician to make sure that you don't have significant hypertension or some other underlying issue that would make that be a problem, especially if it's accompanied with like blurred vision or you notice other neurologic signs. Then it's an emergency that needs to be looked into immediately.
Right. So the pulse rate. We know that pulse rates can certainly have some signs that mean something. I'm sure that somehow that's kind of akin to blood pressure as well? I don't know. Kind of tell me how the blood pressure and the pulse rate kind of correlates. It might give you a sign that something is wrong during an exam.
Yeah, so they usually move together. So like if I could teleport to where you're sitting right now and do a physical exam and get your heart rate and your blood pressure, because we just both been sitting here just talking, so you kind
Right.
of rest. You would expect your blood pressure and your heart rate to be kind of baseline low. And then if we go out and you and I, we do some hard training, we hold pads or grapple or something like that. And then after 20 minutes, we're both sweating and having a hard time breathing. You check it again, you'd expect your blood pressure to be a little bit higher and your heart rate to be significantly higher. Now, if those two things move in different directions, then that tells you that something is wrong. So, like if your blood pressure is low, but your heart rate is really high, you're dehydrated or you could be bleeding somewhere or something's off to cause that. Or vice versa, if your blood pressure is getting to be really, really high, but your heart rate's not increasing or your heart rate's lower than it was at baseline, that would make me suspicious that there's something going on causing your high blood pressure that's pathologic, like you've got to bleed someplace or your intracranial pressure is higher or something like that. And then you can also use your heart rate as a great indicator of sort of where you're at from a cardiovascular fitness standpoint, especially if you do consistent heart rate monitoring. So, like when I'm doing strict cardio of some sorts, be it high intensity, like Tabatas and stuff like that, or if I'm going to go out and try to put some road work in, I wear a heart rate monitor because I know what my baseline and my max heart rate is. So I know I want to keep my heart rate between this degree or this range and that range or this number and that number to kind of stay in the range where I'm increasing my cardio without working so hard that I've crossed my aerobic threshold and start getting a lot of lactic acid and limiting myself. And I also, when I've got like a competition coming up and I'm trying to push myself a lot harder, or if I feel like I'm dragging in training despite getting what I think is adequate sleep, and I think I might be quote unquote overtraining, or I think better said, under recovering,
Right.
I check my heart rate first thing in the morning. And if I notice a couple days in a row that my resting heart rate is 75 instead of 50 or 55 like it should be, and that happens a couple days and I feel tired, I know that my body's not recovered as much as it should be, and it's time for a day off or a day of active rest or something. That's not the time to decide to go and do a couple of extra rounds or jump in on somebody's open mat in addition to my normal training. And a lot of our fighters in our gym will do the same thing. They get in the habit of taking their heart rate in the morning, and they know when I'm in shape and I'm doing good, my heart rate should be X in the morning. And if they see a
Right.
trend where that's increasing, it's a warning sign to the trainers to, hey, you know what? We had hard sparring day planned for Wednesday, but his heart rate was X on Monday, X plus 10 on Tuesday, and this morning
Right.
it's X plus 25. Let's kick that to Thursday or Friday, and today we're going to do some active rest. We're going to go hit the pool or something instead to kind of back them down a little bit, give them a little bit more time to recover so that they can do a good job when they're doing their hard sparring.
Right, right. Good information again there, Doc. I can make this show so long. I can't believe how time just flies. I love your answers and stuff like that. And I think it's going to help out a lot of people. I have by the way, for everyone who's waiting to see Mr. Jake DeAndre, I'm going to bring him on another show. So I'm going to probably cut this show off and bring him on a little bit later today, right after this show. So he'll be coming up. And I didn't want him waiting too long in the lobby there because I wanted to make sure that this information right here was definitely getting out to everyone. One of the things, though, I do want to ask you about since the last time you've been on, I don't remember if we talked about this, Doc, was about the transgender issue that we had at the last event. I know I did speak with you in person about it, but I kind of want to know, how does that play out in Europe? How do you see this playing out in the future as we have perhaps more situation like this that shows up?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's really more of a political question than it is a medical question. The person, she was on your show, so I'm going to use her name. I don't think that she would care.
Right, no, she's probably okay.
Yeah, Raven was awesome. I think that she disclosed when she came. She said, "Hey, I'm transitioning. Is that a problem?" And I believe, although I don't know this for certain, I think she told her opponent about that as well. And she really handled the situation, I thought, really well. And we need to make the fight sports a place for everybody. We got to figure. I think that we need to, just as a community, we need to figure out how we're going to get that to work. And in some situations, like with her, she came in, she fought at a weight class and was definitely not overpowered for that weight class. She wasn't, you see these stories that pop up on the internet of people claiming to be transgender that are setting powerlifting records and things like that. And there's some question about, are they just saying that to prove, is it just a guy who's saying I'm transgender to prove a point and try to compete against someone who's biologically a woman? And then the harder issues of people who really are transgender that are transitioning from male to female and have had the I guess benefit, for lack of a better term, of testosterone for 18, 20, 25 years, but now are taking medications to lower the testosterone to what would be equivalent in a female that same age. And you see the body changes that go along with that. So they don't look like a professional male bodybuilder who's dressed like a woman. They look like a woman. And I think those two things probably need to be handled differently. And
yeah, but what about the strength? I'm sorry, Doc, but what about the strength issue? That we're definitely going to run into that.
Yeah.
Testosterone issue based with with a person with more estrogen, a woman, and stuff like that. I mean, that's going to become a serious safety issue at some point. It probably already is.
Yeah, and it kind of depends. So people talk about Fallon Fox all the time. She was a transgender MMA fighter who ended up. I can't remember now who it was she fought. An organization didn't watch, but she fought another woman and ended up giving her a skull fracture. And when you look at Fallon Fox, she was big, but you look at Chris Cyborg. I know you're not a huge fan of MMA, but
I know who that is, though.
You know who she is. If you go to your local shopping mall and look at women walking by, you're going to be there a long time before you see a woman walk by who looks like Chris Cyborg. But on the other hand, if you sit in the same shopping mall and wait for a Paulo Costa or Yoel Romero looking guy to walk by, you're going to be there a real long time too. So the fight sports are going to be attracting people who are at the extremes of physicality. If you kind of mentally conjure up the image of the average female fight sport participant, they don't look like the average female. And the same thing with the average male, they're different. So I don't know, and I'm not sure that there's really a scientific answer, and certainly there's not been a political answer that everybody's agreed upon yet. I don't know how to handle people who are transitioning from one gender to the other. I don't have a good answer for that because things that have been tried have all failed. So if you're transitioning from female to male and you're taking male hormones and getting the advantage of testosterone, it doesn't seem fair anymore for them to be competing against women. And most of the transgender men who are doing that don't want to compete against women. They want to compete against men because they see themselves as man. But, Texas has a law that says that you have to compete at whatever sex you were assigned at birth. So there's, for the past couple of years, been a person who was born as a biological woman who transitioned to be a man who's in high school now and is taking those hormones and looks like a man and dresses like a man. But he wrestles, and because he was assigned female sex, he has to wrestle against women. So now he's easily winning the state title because he's basically competing against people his own size and weight when he's taking what would equivalent be large doses of steroids because of that transition. So that course of action doesn't seem to work. And then on the other way around, if you have someone who was biologically assigned a man at birth and has testosterone in their system, they decide to transition to be a woman, like what Raven did. Now, if she's taking, even though she's taking hormones to lower her testosterone and to, develop stereotypically female secondary sex characteristics and things like that, and losing a lot of that muscle mass, some people would argue that having had that testosterone since birth would give you an unfair advantage. And I said, I don't know if we really have an answer for that. It probably depends on the individual person. And I think that for the immediate future, the way to address that is just with information and disclosure. I would expect, just like if I signed up for your tournament as a guy and you found another 45-year-old who was my same weight, but they were 4 inches shorter than me, and they looked like a science project. They look like a He-Man action figure because they're clearly abusing steroids.
Right.
I have the right to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to fight Hulk Hogan over there because I'm cheating. I think that if somebody were to present themselves to participate in a fight sport where they were biologically assigned male gender at birth and transitioned to female gender, but they still appear to have a significant amount of testosterone effect apparent to them. So they've got more muscle mass, outsized strength and whatnot. I think that should be treated by an opponent the same way that you would treat if you were to sign up to fight someone who was biologically assigned female at birth and was abusing steroids, and say, I'm not interested in doing that. And I said, I don't know, like I said, from a medical standpoint, how that's going to play out, and if there's going to be at some point in the future we're going to come to a consensus that, if you're going to consider yourself to be this age and you say I'm going to be a female, that in order to say you're a female you have to have certain steroid or certain hormone parameters that fit into a certain silo. And the same thing from a male standpoint, I really don't know that. And right. There's other issues too. There's people that are born that literally have secondary sex characteristics of both sexes. There's some people who you would see, for lack of a better descriptive term, if you saw them naked, you would say that's a woman, right. Born a woman. But when you do their testing, it turns out that their testosterone is a lot higher than it should be. And there's a woman that's, I want to say she's an Olympic athlete, but I'm not certain of that. But she's a high-level competitor of some sorts who they found that has a genetic difference that makes her testosterone level significantly higher. Wow. And she therefore carries a lot more muscle mass than women of an equal size, age, and weight, and has, definitely has an advantage. And it's not really clear how to handle that, because anywhere you draw a line, there's going to be a gray area someplace. So it's a long-winded way of saying I don't really know. I certainly don't have an easy solution. They say that there's tons of easy solutions to complex problems, and the only thing they share is that they're all wrong. And I think this is the same thing. It's unlikely we're going to be able to come up with an easy solution to that's going to suit everybody in every circumstance. But I think that just honest discussion and disclosure is probably the most important thing at this point in time.
Right. I certainly agree with all of that. We're definitely, as in the medical field, trainers, everyone, we just got to keep an eye on it to make sure that we keep fighters as safe as we possibly can. Doc, you're really into what you do. What inspired you to become a doctor, number one, in particular a fight doctor?
Yeah, so those two things are probably a lot different.
Yes.
The fight doctor thing, in retrospect, it seems like it was more accident than anything else. But I knew when I was really young that I wanted to be a doctor, and I just always kind of really liked science and anatomy in particular and physiology. It's, I joke with people all the time when they ask what I do. I tell them I work with a hospital system. I do some plumbing and some electric, because it's basically really it's what I do. And especially when I'm talking to a new family that has a baby that has serious congenital heart disease, when I give my initial explanation of what was going on, and you see the family shaking their heads, oh yeah, I get that, with a short explanation, almost invariably they're either mechanics or they work a trade like plumbing or something like that, or he's a pipe fitter or sprinkler fitter, or they're a mechanical engineer, because it's all the same stuff, and the principles are all the same. Right. So it's sort of the love of science and the application of science. And then the fight doctoring thing started. I've always been interested in the martial arts. I think we talked about that a bit one of the prior times that I was. When I started training with Ray in the kickboxing and MMA program, he was doing IKF qualifiers for the Worlds there, and needed somebody to be the physician for it. So it's like, well, I'm a doctor, I can do that. So fortunately, at the time, he had another doctor, an ophthalmologist, that had been doing the ringside stuff for him for a while. So started doing events with him, and then started doing events without him. And then I realized, especially as mixed martial arts became sanctioned in South Carolina, and people sort of moved into the space and started putting on events, it became clear that there was a need for people that had some understanding of fight sports to work at those events. Because especially kickboxing events or MMA events, you need to know something about the sport to really adequately protect the fighter. You can be a great physician, but be completely ignorant about boxing, kickboxing, or MMA, and you're not going to be a real good ringside physician because you're not going to have the ability to identify, yeah, this injury is going to present a danger to them, or you're not going to be able to watch a move unfold and go, oh, you know, I noticed that before they tried that arm bar, he was throwing a right hook and leading, you know, with a right jab all the time. And now all of a sudden he switched stance. I haven't seen him throw a punch with his right arm since that arm bar. I'll bet you he hurt his elbow, or I bet you he dislocated his shoulder. You know, if you don't know what you're watching, you're not going to be able to identify stuff like that. So it was kind of, there was a need. I stepped into it and then kind of built from there.
Well, we're certainly glad to have you part of it. We're getting ready, and as we close out right here, Doc, your answers have been phenomenal as always, and I'm sure it's going to help out a lot of people, right, who might take some time to check out this, I call it podcast. One of the things, too, is we're getting ready for our East Coast Classic, October 4th and 5th in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. What about that event that kind of, you know, gets you, what do you see most? When between the fighters, the fans, what is it about that event that kind of intrigues you?
So I think the thing that I like best about that event, and it's sort of just because there's so many fight sports people there, I think it's just an amplification of what I see every time I go to a fight sport event. And it sounds corny, but everybody who's involved in a fight sport is kind of a family. You know, it takes a certain kind of person. You could argue pretty odd person to decide, you know what, I'm going to spend my time doing all this hard work so I can get into the ring with someone else who's done a lot of hard work to try to hurt me while I try to hurt them, and then be okay with each other afterwards. You know, there's a sort of I think there's an inherent respect to the mindset and the amount of effort and dedication that people put into the training and the competing and all that kind of stuff that, you know, you see people get really irritated with each other and with the refs and with the judging and with you, I'm sure, during the actual fight. But by the end of the day, everybody's okay. You know, you don't see people getting in fights out in the parking lot and stuff like that. And anytime I go someplace and see somebody that's got, you know, cauliflower ear, their nose is bent in the way that every boxer I know's nose is always bent. They're wearing a shirt that says Muay Thai or something like that. There's sort of a kindred spirit there because you know, there's even if you've never contacted each other in training or in fighting, there's a shared experience that you're kind of part of, and that really makes these sort of events special. It's the only time you get. It's kind of like going to a family reunion. There may be some people there who you don't know, but you're all part of the same family, and that kind of ties things together in a way that just getting together with a group of random people for a party doesn't. So it's that general atmosphere that I really like. And despite all the trash talking and stuff you see at high levels of the fight sports, there's still, fortunately, and I hope it always continues to be this way, there's still a lot of respect amongst the fighters for each other, from the trainers to the fighters and from the trainers to each other. And in this day and age, it's getting hard to find places where you can get a group of people together that might not see eye to eye on something, but respect everything. I mean, look at last time we were there. I'm sure if you had done a poll at the last event, specifically the one that Raven was at, you would have found people all over the political spectrum. There's right-wing people, left-wing people, libertarians, and everything. But when you hop in the ring, no one cares. You're someone who I'm going to fight, I'm going to compete with, and we're going to find out at this day, during these 3 rounds, who does a better job fighting. And at the end of it, we're going to shake hands, and our corners are going to shake hands, and we'll go back and we're going to train so that next time I can do better. And everybody's, you know, kind of pulling the same thing. And so you don't see that very often. Right.
Well, I think that, again, when you talked about a little earlier about, you know, about the what makes it happen and what makes it special, you, sir, are one of the things that makes it special for me and for a lot of the fighters there. And I think the information that you're sharing, your commitment to the sport, your commitment to safety in the medical field is just outstanding. And I appreciate you for taking this time today to come on the show and educate people about you know, some of the things that they need to know to better take care of themselves. So thanks so much for being on today. And you know, I'm going to talk to you real soon, as we always do. Any final thoughts about as people are preparing for the East Coast Classic in October, what, from a medical perspective, what would be your final piece of advice?
So probably two things. Train
Okay.
smart. So, put the work in, show up in shape and with the skill set you need to compete well. Don't blow it off and be like, I'll be okay. Put the work in so you can give a good account of yourself and you can keep yourself safe when you're in the ring.
Right.
And when you're sitting there with a paper in front of you and you're picking a weight division for yourself, or
Oh,
particularly
yeah. Big
when
one.
you're picking a weight division for your kid, don't pick what weight do I think I can get them down to. You pick the weight that they should fight at.
Wow. Perfect. Perfect. That is perfect because so many people are making these mistakes, right? Of putting in these weight classes that they know they can't make or they're going to kill and starve themselves. That is probably one of the best pieces of advice is that, that you've given here. I mean, that is awesome. And it's a great way to end this part of the show. Dr. Lucas, you are the man with this
Thanks, Johnny.
fight doctor himself. We're going to talk to you real soon. Okay, Dr. Lucas?
All right, take it easy.
Thanks so much. Oh my gosh, that was just awesome. Dr. Lucas is the man. We love him so much. Love all the stuff he does for the fighters and taking care of them, guys. Safety is paramount with our events. At any event you can see Dr. Lucas at, you can hurry and believe that the fighters are going to get the best care. And that is what it's all about. So I want to really thank him again for being on the show. Phenomenal guy, phenomenal physician there. Thanks again, Dr. Lucas. Okay, so we're going to move on to a couple other things. We hope to have Mr. Jake DeAndre here on just a second. We're going to be speaking with him about his upcoming event there, if we can get him back in the lobby there. Again, want to remind everybody about the second deadline coming up for our ICAP East Coast Classic coming up on October 4th and 5th in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. This is a good event for amateur kickboxing and Muay Thai and unified rules, international rules, and full rule Muay Thai with elbows and pads, of course, and all. And it's a pretty good event, but you got to get registered at akpromotions.org. You got to do it now. And in fact, if you go ahead and do it now, you will save yourself some money. After Monday, it's going to go up like another $10. By the way, we have the most affordable tournament probably in all of the tournaments that are going on. I mean, top price is like $95. I mean, you're getting nice championship belts, nice cups, nice medals, and the fight night scene that we create within a Friday night show, a Saturday show, and a Saturday night show. Very different than what you see in a normal tournament. We kind of put that little bit of Las Vegas spin on it with food and lights and cameras and stuff like that. We also will have Lola Land photography there, taking some great pictures there for you. I mean, there is a lot going on. Jennifer Waters and Derek Reams, I should say Derek Reams and Jennifer Waters will be our hosts there for our Johnny Davis Live broadcast that's going to be going on for the event. I know a lot of people ask me about live streaming, but you know what? I'm skeptical about that. I am talking to someone, to be honest. If you have an opinion about it, just shoot me a line on a message and I can consider it. But, for the most part, we're going to probably do it right here on Johnny Davis Live. So if you haven't done so yet, you want to subscribe to AK Promotions on Facebook or friend me at Johnny Davis on Facebook. And you'll probably be able, by the time the show, you're going to see some of the fights, a lot of commentary. They're going to be interviewing a lot of the fighters and people that are going to be involved with the event. You're going to see them with my Johnny Davis Live caps on and T-shirts and stuff. And so we're planning a pretty spectacular event for you guys. At the ICAP East Coast Classic, we've been doing it for 7 years, guys. It's at the Crown Reef Conference Center, a very nice location. If you haven't been to Myrtle Beach, it is a reason to go to Myrtle Beach on that weekend. If you're just a fan, it is a fight fans' dream to be at this event. You'll see probably 60, 70 fights on that one weekend. Or you can pick whatever event you want to be a part of and come out and check out that show in particular. A Friday night show from 7 to 11, a Saturday morning show from like 9 to 5, and a Saturday night show again from like 7 to 11. You can make your choice, and you're going to know, the fighters are going to know in advance when they will be competing on the show. So it's a kind of unique event there. It takes a lot of work to make it all happen, but I hope you guys will be a part of it. You trainers, you fighters, get those fighters involved with that. Save money. Don't wait. There are people waiting right now for you to register in that event. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I have for you today. Perhaps we'll be back on in just a few moments with Mr. Jake to talk a little bit about his upcoming IKF PKB event. We want to always thank you for watching Johnny Davis Live. Always thanks to our sponsors, Blackout Fight Gear at blackoutfights.com and Eastern Offset Printing. Always, guys, Fort March. This is Johnny Davis Live, and I'm checking out. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.